Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is a down and dirty Z50R. Alright, here's the game plan. Today, we're going to try to mount as much of this engine on this mini bike as we can. We have a PZ22 carburetor, an intake manifold. This is that hose that I removed. It came with this one. It's got some sort of a filter. I guess as good as mine. We have some gaskets for the carburetor, shifter, kickstarter, electric stuff. This is the coil, and we have a nice simple harness. Sometimes it pays to be eccentric. You tend to think outside the box. I just looked down and saw a case of water that looked about the right height, and ta-da! Check that out. There's our mounting hole. I'm basically in the box, you know, this section here, cradle maybe. All I'm gonna have to do is pull this down and into position. There's no kickstand here, so it's gonna be off video. I don't have enough room to back up and get a good view of this. I tried, but that's what I'm working with. All right, so this is saving me all kinds of backaches and trouble. What was giving me trouble is this hose. It might be some sort of a breather. I'm not sure yet, but it was held up by this clamp. You see the bolt? It's going through. What I did is started to line up those holes. When I had about a half moon, I got in there with this big taper job. Alright, we'll call it a drift pin. When I had that pin in there, I was able to pull the casing back so that the hole was straight. I took the pin out, stuck the bolt in. Here's the result. Okay, we're almost lined up. I'm going to take that same pin. I have my hammer right there, just a little light one. And I'm going to knock that pin back so that I can get into the casing. So I'll knock it back about halfway through, right? And then I'll use the drift to line it up. I'll pull it out, and then probably use my little hammer there to tap my bolt through. This paint that rubbed off from the back side of the mount, that was from trying to initially line up that one. You can see the bolt, it's through. I think they had it going the other way before. I'm going to try this way to see if it matters. I know that this one goes this way. I don't know, I just want them to go the same way, so I'm going this way. This one is going to be a lot easier. I just lift up on the front and, you know, swish. We're right there. Once I had the top one set with the nut, get a load of this. Woo! In and out. Couple 12 millimeters. We're tight and right. Now I'm going to clear the deck and hoist this bad boy up there. we might as well dive right off the end into the great unknown. This is going to be a learning experience. You take a look at this harness, we definitely know that that is going to go to this little CDI box. This one is going to the coil right there, and here's a ground that I think goes back next to the coil. That'll leave us with all of these colorful options. It's kind of weird that they don't just match. I'm just going to start plugging stuff in and sort of figuring out where it goes. Word up. So apparently they are color coded. Just a little different, where this one might look white with blue. There's one over here that looks blue with a white stripe. Same there, you have a black with a red stripe. Over here it looks like it's red with a black stripe maybe. Green to green. Those are the three that are important. The other three, well, we have a charging system and lights, and then there's this guy here. That one's kind of cool. I traced it back to right there. To get you in focus, you see that green and red? This would be for a neutral shift light. Kind of neat if we could rig that up. The other end, just like I said, went back to that CDI box and the coil. Here's our ground. This looks a little different than what we were running stock. We might have an adapter or something that holds it up under here. Connects to these holes, I think, from the bottom. Maybe, oh, let's find the other one first. There it is. Oh, that stinks. I thought that cage would come off and then we could reuse it on the other coil. It appears they just ran the coil wire back and then attached the ground. Then they got this. Maybe this wasn't so smart. I think we can modify the other one. There's 3 holes drilled under where the seat goes. Originally, that center one was where that other coil was mounted with the one stud. We're going to use 2 bolts. This hole is going to be our first one. I get it to where it sits square, and then I'll reach my punch down inside and I'll make a mark. We can adjust this mark to center it with these holes. That looks alright right where it's at though. You see it? Right there. That's where we're going to put our pilot hole and drill another one of those. Get my shop vac out of here. Alright, we have our new hole, and I ran the drill bit around the outsides of that other hole so that there was some bare metal. So now we can place this down. There's our other hole. That'll work okay. Now we just have to figure out a way to mount it on the bottom. The seat's going to go on top, so it's got to go up under here. Here's what I came up with. These two bolts are just a little bit longer than the two that they supplied for the coil. I got these from the side cover that came off of that old engine. I'm going to be feeding them up this way. So we're going to go through the coil and then a series of washers. Hopefully I can bring the whole thing up with the washers and everything, just like these are studs, holding them with my hand, and through these two holes where we can get a lock washer and a nut on each one. One thing I'm checking is the length of my wire running back to my spark plug. You can always go custom. The exhaust goes up the other side, so I'm trying to keep this thing as safe as possible. See if we have enough slack to mount this. I think we're going to be okay there. Let me set this up. I have 8 lock washers on each side. I have my wire plugged into the coil and my ground hooked up just like so. I'm going to reach up under here, feed these through, and then I have a couple nuts right there, an extra, and plenty, well, not really plenty anymore, but I got a few more lock washers left. Underneath, this has a nice factory look to it. You can see the washers up here, and the reason we use so many is so that the plastic housing on this coil isn't resting against the frame. So when we torque these down, which is good and plenty, we're not stressing the coil at all. We're just holding it directly on. Up top, there's what you get. Beautiful. The CDI box came with a new one of these rubber mounting bands. We have a few different options. We could go this way and then kind of stuff it under the seat. Could go this way, but we don't have a side panel. I think we're going to do it just like that. Right on the old Tangaroony. That's not going anywhere soon. These two wires are for a kill switch. I have one off of a mini bike. It conveniently has the same colors, and I'm going to be mounting it over here next to the throttle. We'll clean this up with some zip ties later. I'm just running it next to my brake line and then coming back under the top plate. So I'll Y off of that. I'll keep those two together, and then come under the gas tank mount. We'll see what happens with this thing. And then we'll just bring our two ends right down here and plug them in. That means that this one must be spliced into this one somewhere in here, because then they would run back over this way. So we could hook up a secondary kill switch. Now that I know where everything goes, I just unplugged this end of the harness. I'm going to run it up under here. Nothing else goes there, and it's really a nice spot to try to stuff these things. I just extended this conduit a little bit right down to the end of the harness. I folded back those 3 wires that we weren't using and secured them with some electrical tape. I think these will be okay. They're not really exposed. These are actually some nice little terminals and sleeves they have on here, so we can kind of leave those out so we can unplug it and plug it back in, right? I'm cool with that. I like to be able to see everything and access it without taking it all apart. At the same time, it's just a couple zip ties. Back here, I left everything the same. Once we figure out if this runs, I may tape this up too, and maybe a little bit up here. Now I'll just bring my coil wire in the boot right through here, cross over. That's pretty clean. Slightly used sprocket. Slightly used chain. Makes sense to me. I'm going to try to find a length and cut this thing. Oh, I also have both my tensioners in the same spot, and made sure to give it a good bump on the rear wheel to bring the axle up square. Wham bam bla jam. Dual master links and all. I'm not worried about it. This is EK 420 from my friends over at OMBWarehouse.com. This stuff is super strong, and it has super low hours on it. It's not like I was out running around at 50-60 miles an hour stretching the bag out of it. So now we can go back to our adjusters, tensioners, whatever you want to call it. We're going to bring them back evenly and try to take some of this slackage out. T-Bolt USA absolutely killed it with this design. It's very simple, yet very effective. You have these amazing little axle slides, these really cool channels. They have the increment marks so that you know everything's parallel. And it's machined so nice. When you turn that little 10mm bolt, you see that chain move? When you back off, you can see it slack up too. Very, very high quality. I'm extremely impressed. I really need a seat so that I can load this thing up with my considerable bulk and see what's going to happen. But I have the chain somewhat slack, so when it compresses and the swing arm goes up and it gets tighter, we should be okay. I think when it compresses, it comes off of this slide too. Ooh. Yeah, I sort of suspected this was going to happen, and I'll explain why in a second. You see how close our chain is to our case? That is no bueno. A popular modification is to add an idler wheel or a tensioner somewhere right around here. Now, on the genuine Hondas, they seem to have a hole to work with. This one, we have our brake piton going all the way across. So, we're not going to mess with that. We'll see if we can do something just above it. We'll have to slacken the chain up. But it also means we're going to have to go way up top, because we need a bucket do tensionaire. Yeah, I'm going to have to dig around a second. This is just a tensioner off of a Coleman CT100U. I made a couple marks and tried lining this thing up with the chain slung over it. I'm trying to find the most efficient spot to get the chain up and away from my case, but also allow maximum area up in here. So when the swing arm goes this way, it should bring the chain with it, but I don't think it's going to get closer right here. I think it just comes away at the top. If I drill it right there, we should have enough cyborg meat. It's a nice flat spot, and it gives us enough room to get a nut on from the back. It's going to be held on with a long bolt. I have my idler wheel, a few washers, a nylock nut, and my bolt. That's all it's going to take. Unlike the cheese ball plastic versions, the Coleman is a steel idler with ball bearings. I had to loosen up the axle adjusters considerably to get the chain back on. Here it is, loose. And this is with the adjusters pulled back a little bit. We have about 3/4 of an inch to an inch of play at the top. Plenty at the bottom. This thing ought to spin like hot butter. I have my side cover on, and we are quickly running out of parts. We're only going to get so far, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. The last thing we're going to do is install this PZ22 carburetor. I already took a little bit of oil, just a couple drops on my fingertip, and applied it to the face of the gasket on both sides. We'll take this nice little seal off. Nice port. And that is where this gasket's going to go. Let me get that dirt off of that thing. Better than new. Just for luck. Next is the intake manifold. It goes on just like that, so that the carburetor is kicked out to this side. I'm going to attach it with these two shorter bolts. There was enough threads to get a lock washer on these, so I did. They're not torqued extremely tight. I only used one of these little wrenches. These other bolts are long enough to include the insulator. I already installed the O-ring that came with it, and on the PZ22 it has threaded inserts, so there's no nuts to worry about. This goes on so that the O-ring is facing the flat side of the manifold. The back side of the insulator seals against the O-ring on the carburetor. This carburetor is installed. We now need an air filter, which I ordered, and a throttle cable, which I am also waiting for. This engine is a Lifan PCC 125. It is actually a 124 crate motor with the 54x54 bore and stroke. It has a 4-disc manual clutch with the 4-up transmission. So that means we're also going to have to install the perch and lever. Besides the obvious missing gas tank, I also have an exhaust system to get on here. I went with the budget option that I found on Amazon, and it's going to take just a little bit of modification to get it right. Once the throttle, clutch, and exhaust are situated, we'll go after the kickstarter, the shifter, and the foot pegs. In the next video, we'll take it easy and install a brand new seat. Until then, have a good night. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.
I want you to stay. I want you to stay. I want you to stay. I want you to stay.